Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high-performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back. This episode is brought to you by L-Nutra, nutrition technology for longevity. Are you looking for a smarter, science-backed way to support muscle health and longevity? Meet L-Protein from L-Nutra, the only plant-based protein powder of its kind, uniquely designed to enhance muscle growth and slow down the aging process. Unlike typical whey proteins, which activate pro-aging pathways, L-Protein supports your body with 25 grams of complete plant-based protein designed to keep IGF-1 low for optimal aging. With L-Nutra's pioneering approach to nutrition technology, this isn't just protein. It's nutrition for longevity, perfect for post-workout recovery, a nutrient-packed breakfast, or an afternoon snack. Personally, I love the chocolate-flavored protein shake as a delicious and super quick post-workout breakfast. As someone who would like to gain some muscle mass, it's important to me to get enough high-quality protein, and this is a great option. So if you're serious about fueling your body for both performance and long-term health, L-Protein might be just what you were looking for. Plus, it's packed with essential vitamins and minerals, all sourced from real fruits, veggies, and mushrooms, ensuring you're nourished in the most natural way possible. Can't go wrong with that, right? So if you'd like to check it out, go to prolonlife.com/wired. That's prolonlife.com/wired to get your L-Protein today. I'll also link it in the show notes. Without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that help you get to that next level of success in your life and business. My guest today is Alec Crawford, the founder and CEO of Artificial Intelligence Risk, a company that accelerates enterprise Gen AI adoption safely. He's a thought leader for Gen AI with a blog and his own podcast called AI Risk Reward. He has more than 30 years of experience on Wall Street, with his last role being partner and chief risk officer for investments at Lord Abbett, if I pronounced that correctly. With AI becoming more and more powerful and prevalent, I think cybersecurity is such an important topic. So I'm really looking forward to talking about this today. Welcome, Alec, and thank you so much for being on my show today.
Thanks, Claudia. Great to be here. Very excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. And maybe we should start with a definition. So when you talk about Gen AI, you're talking about generative artificial intelligence, right? And can you maybe explain the concept for people who are not familiar with that?
Yeah, so I like to divide things into traditional machine learning and generative AI. So traditional machine learning, which is what a lot of computer scientists and other people were using, decades ago, even including me, takes lots of data. Instead of programming a computer, you basically train the computer or teach the computer by giving it access to lots of data. And that's kind of how Gen AI is built as well. And the really major difference, as everybody saw with the ChatGPT release fewer than 2 years ago, is that anyone can interact with Gen AI. If you know how to talk or type, you're good. You are using AI, whereas before you really needed to be an expert. So when people talk about generative AI, it's pretty broad, because it could be ChatGPT, like you type in a question, it gives you an answer, you ask it to write a paper or whatever, it can do all those different things. But don't forget, there's also generative AI for things like music and art. And listen, there are a lot of ethical concerns around all of generative AI, but that's the definition.
Right. So is machine learning part of that process, and it can't really be distinguished between the two things, right?
Yeah, I'd say generative AI is a subset of AI machine learning, right? There's two parts, right? The training part. So think about ChatGPT is a great example where it's trained on literally everything that OpenAI can get its hands on: books, transcripts, everything on the internet, everything you can dream up, right? I think they've cut a deal uh, for example, with Reddit to get access to all the content there. And the more content that it trains on, the better it is, right? Now it is kind of the average content, right? There's no way for in the training process, or it's very difficult to train the AI on, hey, what's a great answer and what's a good answer and what's an average answer and what's a bad answer, right? Now there is a little bit of that going on during what's called the supervised learning process, where if once Gen AI is trained, you can have a bunch of employees or contract workers sit there, and if they get a really bad answer, they can give it a thumbs down and go, "Oh, that was terrible, that was
Yeah.
wrong, or bad, or inappropriate," and then the model can be fine tuned from there. So that's the learning part, and then there's the inference part where users like you or me can go in there and say, "Hey, what's the capital of France?" And it'll say Paris. Or you can say, "Write me a haiku around snow and winter," and it will do it. Right? Those are the two different parts of Gen AI.
It's amazing what ChatGPT is able to do these days. I mean, it has led some people to believe that we are going in the direction of actually generalized artificial intelligence, where or that ChatGPT starts to become conscious. What's your thought on this? Is it still just mimicking the learning data set, or is it starting to become something else entirely?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So, what you're referring to there is something called artificial general intelligence,
Yes, that's
or effectively an AI that can act like a human and solve problems, and may or may not be conscious. That's not part of the AGI definition technically. And what I'd say is we're not there, right? I think that we're at a phase right now, which is called statistical artificial intelligence. In other words, you really need to go and look at the guts of generative AI and say, how does it work, right?
mhm.
And for text, the way it works is all it's trying to do is figure out what's the correct next word, or technically token, right? So if I say the sky is, what's the next word, Claudia?
Blue.
Right. So that's kind of how Gen AI works. It says, oh, okay, what are the words I have so far? And what's the most likely next word? Now, what's interesting is um, it doesn't pick the necessarily the most highly probable word that's next. Sometimes it picks a different word. In other words, there's a randomness, or what the statisticians call stochastic element to it, where it
Mhm.
doesn't always pick the same word. Otherwise, it'd be boring, right? Otherwise, you get this. If I
Yeah.
say, "Give me a poem about winter and snow," it's going to give me the same poem each time. Like that's kind of boring, right? So it has to randomize a little bit. So when you say the sky is, sometimes it's going to say cloudy instead of blue, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. So that's what really makes generative AI, but also creates problems because if it doesn't have data that you're asking it about, it could end up what's called hallucinating, or giving you a completely made up answer or even a wrong answer sometimes.
Why is that? Can't you program it to say, I don't know, if it doesn't know?
Yeah, I think there's certainly companies that are trying to do that. And I think most companies' goal is to get you the right answer as opposed to saying I don't know. And let's go back to AGI for a minute. I think AGI is in the realm of the possible for the human race. We're very ingenious. We're very good at figuring things out. And maybe it ends up being a combination between what we have today and quantum computing, right? So, in fact, there's some recent studies that show that consciousness in the human brain may be because of what's called quantum tunneling inside the human brain. In other words, the human brain may effectively be a quantum computer. Um, I think we're always going to have the issues with bad data and hallucinations, both from humans and from computers. It's just never going to go away, and we can try to make it better and better. And my advice to everybody right now is similar to talking to your teenager. Trust but verify, right? If you get an answer from someone,
Yeah.
from your teenager or Gen AI, check the answer if it's important. If it's not important, if it's a cookie recipe and it looks pretty good, like, all right, you're probably fine, right? If it's something really important, like something you're going to send to your boss, or if you remember that court case where the lawyer had an AI write up the brief for him, and all the cases it cited were fabricated. Like, yeah, you should probably check that.
Yeah, totally. How dangerous do you think it would be once we have maybe quantum computers and generative AI and we combine those two? How powerful and or how dangerous is that going to be?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's a great question. Look, there's certainly people on both sides of that. There are people who think that it is an existential threat to the human race, like pretty soon, right? And there are others that are saying, listen, this is generations away, and we kind of know what we're doing. Um, I think the danger comes from the competition itself, right? You have a lot of different countries building Gen AI and very advanced AI and aiming for AGI. And look, there are lots and lots of ways it is going to help humanity, right? I mean, we're going to have AI assistants for doctors that are going to make them way better at what they do. And there's a very simple reason for that. Like, no one could possibly read all the research in their field anymore. There's just too much research out there, right? So, a great example is I had the CEO of Atropos Health, Brigham Hyde, on my podcast, AI Risk Reward, and he talked about how they're literally doing customized medical research for doctors for a specific patient with a specific ailment, and in 5 minutes can go out there and search all the research papers and come back with kind of a customized report for that doctor, for that patient. Now, of course, the doctor has to read it before giving to the patient, but that is just light years ahead of anything we had a few years ago. But this competition between different countries to generate AGI and then use it to do not just things for good, but also potentially for warfare, that is extremely dangerous. And one of my mantras is never give AI the nuclear codes, right? And that seems very obvious, right? But there are some people out there to whom that's not obvious.
Okay. It sounds very risky to give it those codes. I wouldn't give it to, well, you should probably never give those codes to people without a moral compass. And you should probably also not give it to AI, which probably by definition doesn't really have a moral compass.
I completely agree.
Can you program that in? How easy would it be to align, like the alignment problem in AI? How difficult is that?
I think it's actually super hard. And think about humans, right? Like, so there are humans out there that seem perfectly nice and all that. And I don't know if you've ever read Eric Larson's Devil in the White City.
You haven't.
Great book. It's about the Chicago World's Fair, but it's also about a very evil sociopath that during the Chicago's World's Fair, lures people to his house and kills them, basically, right? So the problem that we're going to have is obviously those people trusted that human and then end up dying for it. Like, if we could have an AI that on the surface seems like it's helping us, everything's great, and something could go wrong, or it could literally have a psychotic break or the equivalent thereof, and then be trying to do very bad stuff for us. But I also want to emphasize that it doesn't necessarily even need to be malicious or what we would perceive as malicious. So here's a great example. So obviously, giving AI the nuclear codes, it decides that we're bugs and wants to wipe out life on Earth. That's a plot for a movie. In fact, it's probably been in a ton of movies besides the Terminator movies, right? But beyond that, okay, well, let's say for the sake of argument, we come up with this amazing AI that shows us what to plant in the US and how much fertilizer to use and how much water to use and things like that. And then something goes wrong and it does a really bad job, but we trust it. We're like, well, that looks weird, but AI is so smart. We're just going to go with that, right? And then our crops fail for an
Yeah.
entire year. Like that's not a malicious thing. It just, it's a bug in the program, so to speak, right? With huge consequences to humanity, right? So we have to be careful about, trust but verify.
Mm. Yeah, I also wonder about the paperclip maximizer scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to be very careful about, what you ask AI to do. And look, I've been doing computer science since the 1980s, and this is just classic, right? Like I've done all kinds of programs and tools to maximize this or that and optimize this or that, and you end up with hundreds or thousands of unintended consequences, not just one
Yeah.
unintended consequence. So you have to be super, super careful what you're doing. And look, I think the other thing to think about is it's not just companies or individuals or research institutions or universities building out AI, it's governments, right?
Mm.
This is a really big deal, right? And I think one of the things that we've given short shrift as both institutions and individuals and countries is cybersecurity for AI, right? It's going to contain all of our data, all our most secret data. The models themselves are super powerful, and I think so far we haven't seen a giant cybersecurity problem with AI, but it's coming because people are not taking it seriously enough.
Mm. Yeah, I heard that as soon as we have quantum computers, then encryption is basically gone. Is that correct?
Let's say
You
today's encryption is, yeah. I've talked about this with a number of experts, and sure, if magically we had quantum computing available tomorrow, it could crack, most of the encryption on most of the things that we're using today, right? I think it's expensive to do that. It's not like someone's going to run around and try to decrypt,
mm,
all your WhatsApp messages or something like that. They're going to look for high value targets like government
sure.
organizations and defense contractors and things like that. So I wouldn't worry so much about your WhatsApp messages to your spouse, right? But obviously there are other things that are more critical. And look, this is like a Y2K problem, right? People have seen it in
Mm.
advance. They're going to fix it before we get there. All you really need to do is increase the complexity of the encryption, right? So, oh, okay, we're going to use 64-bit or 128-bit instead of 32-bit, and we're good, right? So this is not a hard problem to solve. It's a very straightforward problem to solve.
I'll take your word for this. Alec, you were building neural networks and teaching computers to play poker at Harvard before AI was even a buzzword. Can you share a bit about your background and how this early work shaped your perspective on risk, decision making, and technology in general?
Wow, yeah, thanks, Claudia. That's fun to think about. So yeah, AI was actually going through a renaissance in the 1980s. It's really been the concept of neural networks were come up with in the 1950s,
Mm-hmm.
but people didn't really have computers to do much. By the 80s, we had computers that were powerful enough to run neural networks. And I was doing fun stuff like building neural networks from scratch, as you mentioned, teaching them to play poker, playing around with expert systems, things like that. And what I saw then, and imagined that, and actually wrote in my Harvard thesis, was the concept of composite AI, where you combine different elements of AI to create something more powerful. So an expert system combined with neural networks, and that's probably what we're going to see in the future as we get closer and closer to AGI. It's not just going to be something that looks like a neural network. Will be that combined with quantum computing or whatever. I think just using one potential solution appears unlikely. One of the things I did learn there also is um, it's actually hard for AI to unlearn things, even if they're incorrect. So
Mm.
that's something that we're going to have to think a lot about as we move forward with AI. Is making sure that in many cases there's a human in the loop, that we've got governance around AI, meaning like who can do what with AI and who can use which models for what use cases, especially in a business or government context. Because we really need humans to look at the answers and go, yeah, that looks right, or something looks weird there, because AI is not always correct. Although, at least for ChatGPT and many other models, it's always very authoritative. As you pointed out, it's very rare it goes, I don't know the answer to that question. It will try to give you an answer, even if the answer is wrong.
And why is it hard for AI to forget or unlearn? I mean, that's apparently something we have in common. It's hard for humans to do things too.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's partly because it just can't differentiate between right and wrong, right? And there's no, as you mentioned, there's no ethical compass. There's no, reference. I mean, if one were to build a chat GPT that would fact check, you would need to have a separate centralized database of facts to check, right? That you could guarantee were right. And even that becomes fractious, very quickly, right? Because there's some things that we can all agree on, like the earth is a sphere. But if you go to the internet, there's a whole bunch of people talking about the flat earth and, things like that, which all of that's going to go into ChatGPT. Like there's no one sitting there saying, hey, let's just leave the flat earth part out when we train ChatGPT. It's just sucking everything, into the vortex and turning it into an AI model. So again, it will be overwhelmed by all the other things in there talking about how Earth is a sphere and Earth is round and all those kinds of things. But it is in there somewhere, and you can just try it. Go into ChatGPT and say, write a paper proving that the Earth is flat, and it will attempt to do it for you because it's trying to please you, its user, the human.
I think I also heard somewhere that if we have, or if we have quantum computing, that we can use that to build fact checkers for AI. Is that kind of how it could work?
Yeah, it's plausible. The problem is that I think that, some facts are in the eye of the beholder because they're not really facts. They're really opinions, right?
Exactly.
So, for example, at what point do you limit freedom of speech, right? So we have places like Facebook where the government was contacting them during COVID and saying, please take this down or take that down. And then on the other side, you've got Elon Musk at X saying, like, I'm not taking anything down. It's freedom of speech. Just put whatever you want up there, right? And you can see, where's the happy median? I have no idea where the happy median is, right? Where bad things are taken down, but people can still freely, express their opinion. I think it's a super difficult problem that is going to be very difficult to solve, and it's unclear, where on that spectrum between complete government control and people can do whatever they want, you end up.
Yeah, that is a really, really difficult question because truth often isn't black and white. It really is like a spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, this leads us into the topic of compliance or kind of government regulations around AI, right? Where we're seeing, different approaches around the world, right? So for example, Europe, and obviously you live in Germany, Claudia, is really approaching it from a consumer protection standpoint, right? So each AI model has to be ranked in terms of how risky it is, right? So the highest risk things are models that can detect faces and identify people in public, and those are banned in the EU at this point, right? Next level down is something where a human has to be involved, things like AI that's helping diagnose a disease, right? Human has to be involved, right? All the way down to things that are not risky and you can kind of do whatever you want, like an AI that will help you pick a great color to paint your living room, right? Like that, not very risky, right? Like, so I think that's interesting, important in the US. In the US, we've got Biden's executive order, which is likely to go away very quickly. I think Trump has stated that he will basically cancel that as soon as he gets into office. And then what are we left with, right? We're left with kind of a patchwork of state regulations around AI and data privacy, and we're left with the regulators that regulated industries like healthcare and banking and finance in general, trying to come up with, hey, how do we regulate AI? And I'm telling you right now, Claudia, they are desperate for help there. I just submitted a white paper to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency in the U.S. called "How to Regulate AI," right? Which I did at their request, and I think they need all the help they can get from people who are experts in AI and experts in whatever field it is, whether it's healthcare or banking or finance or whatever. And we will see rules, but as you know, technology is advancing very quickly, and government and the regulators are just trying to play catch up. And I think their frame of reference is, they didn't regulate social media fast enough or enough and ended up with a big mess. And they're looking at AI and going, "Ooh, this could be even worse. Like, we got to do something." They just don't know what it is.
Yeah, those are tough decisions. Now, I'm curious, what were the key moments or shifts in your career that really took you from managing financial risk on Wall Street to tackling cybersecurity risks in AI?
Well, that's such a great question. Look, if you had told me how fun it was going to be an entrepreneur 20 years ago, I would have done it 20 years ago, for sure. It is the best. And, people say, "Oh, I'm my own boss," and that kind of stuff. Guess what? Like, your business is the boss. Like, you're not really your own boss, right? And so I think what generated for me was really the aha moment that inspired me to start the business. And that was early 2023, watching huge companies adopt Gen AI with no guardrails. No cybersecurity, no governance, just do it and see what happens. With access to obviously very sensitive data, I just said, this is crazy. Companies need kind of governance and risk management and regulatory compliance and cybersecurity around AI. I'm going to build software that does that automatically, with a big focus, obviously, on banking and healthcare, regulated industries. And I've obviously come from banking and finance. So I built a demo, brought in my co-founder, Frank Fitzgerald, who looked at that and thought about and just said, "Yeah, you're right. This is crazy. Let's do it." So we built out the demo version, the prototype. We had our beta version running by April, and just in end of September, we rolled out our enterprise version, and we're onboarding about a client a week now. So super exciting. And obviously we're super busy, but also making sure we have time to do things besides work.
That's always so important. Now, what was the biggest challenge when you started to build this business? Can you share some of the highs, but also some of the lows?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge was really getting our first 10 clients. Super hard, right? Because a very common question from a potential pilot client or enterprise client is, well, who else is using the software?
Exactly.
Right? If the answer is nobody, that's a very difficult hurdle to jump over. I'd say what was surprisingly easy was raising money to help the business. Look, some of it came from me, but obviously we have some outside investors as well. That really hasn't been that much of an issue, and I think there's maybe a trope out there that's like, "Oh, all founders are 24 years old, went to Stanford, and wear black turtlenecks." Not true. Like, there are tons of founders that have had incredible careers and then decide they want to be entrepreneurs, and that's kind of where I land. I think obviously, look, one of the lows is when you start a company and have no clients and are spending money to hire people, software developers and marketing people and salespeople, things like that. Like, every month you come in and you got less money in the bank. It's the way it is, right?
Yeah.
Until you get some enterprise clients, and that's not a fun thing to watch. The good news is I come from a financial background. Like, I know how to create a budget, all those good things. So we're very good at that. I think there are tons of startups and other private companies that could have been amazing, except they ran out of money.
Yeah, so difficult. So what did help you in the beginning to get those first important clients? Did you
Yeah,
find
I think it's a lot of it's about personal relationships, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the things, there are different periods in my career where I spent a lot of time networking and talking to hundreds or even thousands of individuals and companies. I was a Wall Street analyst for a while, and by definition, what you do there is you write research and you go visit clients, right? And I probably have about 10,000 hours plus of public speaking because of that, which is an
Wow.
amazing skill to have. And at one point, I was literally writing research, every day of the week. So you
Mm.
become a good writer, right? You become a good analyst. But that being said, I think that going forward, as I think about this company, it goes from me and my co-founder knowing people and convincing them they want to try the software to then more broadly convincing larger companies they want to try it. And once you have a group of existing clients, especially across different industries, it becomes pretty straightforward to convince other similar companies to at least try your software. So, for example, we're in procurement with one of the largest financial asset managers in the world right now,
Mm.
because we already have other clients in that area. And then I think what's also really important for the audience to understand is at some point you need to go beyond finding clients one by one and figure out how to scale that, right? Well, that might be because you have a great presence, on the internet and people just sign up for your software. In our case, it's finding strategic partners and signing deals, right? So we publicly announced a deal with Financial Inc., spelled with a Y, that has a lot of, for example, wealth management, registered investment advisor clients, where we're partnering with them to effectively sell our software white labeled to dozens, if not hundreds, of RIAs, and obviously tens of thousands of individual financial advisors. Now we could do that, but it would take us years to do that. I'd rather do that quickly through one deal rather
Mm.
than go out there and spend 3 years trying to sign up all these different RIAs. So that's something that's really important to think about as a founder and entrepreneur, is when do you have enough critical mass that you can start making deals for distribution and sales, not just keep going one by one.
What would you say for like bigger companies maybe who deal with very important and sensitive data? What is there a certain percentage of the revenue that they should set aside and invest in cybersecurity, or is that something that has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, great question. I think it's different for each company. What I would say is almost no one is spending enough money on cybersecurity. It's just the way it
Yeah.
is, right? Because it's human nature, right? You're like, well, we're spending this much money today and we haven't had a problem, right? So we're good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things to think about is if a company's behind on technology, obviously becomes more vulnerable to a cyber attack. Very
Yeah.
straightforward, right? I haven't patched something, I'm using an old version of a program, whatever. But the flip side is, as companies adopt AI and generative AI, they're creating new attack surfaces for the bad guys,
Mm.
right? So you need cybersecurity for Gen AI as well. And part of that is governance. In other words, if I've got a big company and I've got people in the call center and I've got my CFO and my CEO, I'm not giving them all the same access to the AI or the
Mm.
same access to the data or different agents or models. My call center team has access to customer data and frequently asked questions and maybe a few other things, something that will summarize their call transcript and maybe help them improve next time they're on a call. The CFO doesn't need any of that. They need access to the books and records of the firm and agents that will help them write an annual report or a shareholder letter, things like that. Very, very different. And from a cybersecurity standpoint, we want to make sure there's a firewall in between the agents and the data that those two offices can use. You don't want to make everybody a super user on AI at your 10,000 person company. That's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Now, you've said that if fraud were a country, it would be the third largest economy in the world. How should entrepreneurs think about protecting their business against this invisible adversary?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, look, I'd say 75% of the time, fraud happens because of human error, right? So we can install firewalls or something like the AI risk software that's catching attacks on your Gen AI and stopping them before they get there. In the end, it's about the humans, right? And do they click on a phishing email? Do they get a text from someone who purports to be their boss asking for a gift card? Things like that. We just need to train people. Here's what to do. Here's not what to do. Here's what to look for. And this is going to become a bigger and bigger problem because the dark side of Gen AI is it is going to make spear phishing really, really good. At some point, Claudia, you're going to get an email. It could be from me or one of your other guests saying, "Hey, Claudia, it was so great to do the show. I just wanted to share you a link to this video that I made. Check it out." Right. And you're going to click on the link and it's going to be actually an attack, a cyber attack on you. Right. And it's going to look so perfect and so real. And what's even worse about it is they could use Gen AI to train their evil models, right? So if that first email doesn't work, they'll say, "Oh, this didn't work on Claudia or this other 100 people, make it better." And they'll just keep making it better until someone clicks on that link and succumbs to the cyber attack. So we're just going to have to get better and better at figuring that out. But also we're going to need to use software to help us get better. In other words, I can use Gen AI to check emails coming in and say, "This looks like a phishing attack." So I'm not even going to show it to Claudia, or I'm going to put it in a folder that says suspicious emails, or I'm going to deactivate the links in the email. So you can read it, but you actually can't click on the link because it looks too suspicious. So we're going to have to get smart about how to help humans, but also we're going to have to continue to train people to be like, if it looks like a phishing attack and smells like a phishing attack, it's a phishing attack.
Could be one. Yeah. Are there any other specific AI dangers that most entrepreneurs underestimate? And if so, how can they future-proof their companies?
Yeah, I think the biggest danger of AI for entrepreneurs or other companies is not using it, right? If you're not using AI to help your business in the next few years, like you're just going to fall behind everybody else. That to me is the number one danger. You have to figure out how to adopt it, how to use it. That being said, giving AI access to lots of your data, let's say client data and things like that, then you just need to be super careful about it, right? Because why do we encrypt databases, right? We encrypt our customer data and other data, so if someone steals it, they can't do anything with it, right? If a malicious actor gets access to your Gen AI, which has access to your client data, guess what? They have access to your client data. They can just talk to the Gen AI and say, "Please create a spreadsheet with the top 100 clients, names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, whatever," and they've got it. And they can just download it and they're gone and they've got access to your data. So you have to be very, very careful about that. And one of the things that AI Risk does as part of our software is look for things like that. Look for patterns, right? Like, is someone exfiltrating data? Is someone trying to jailbreak the AI so they can get the training data or your sensitive customer data or whatever? And right now, people are interested and companies are interested in that. But once we see a giant hack at some point over the next year or two, everybody's going to wake up and go, "Oh my God, we have to buy that." So that goes back to the whole budget for cybersecurity thing. Budgets are great until you absolutely have to have something now to protect yourself, and then the budget doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, true. I mean, many entrepreneurs are just so overwhelmed by the technical side of cybersecurity. So what's the 80-20 principle that they should focus on to safeguard their businesses?
Yeah, look, if you're not a cybersecurity expert, you should be hiring a managed service provider that can help you, right? And what I would say is there's some super easy things to do to get the 80-20 part. Number one is everything should have two-factor authentication, right? Meaning not just your login your password, but some kind of something on your phone or whatever that gives you a token or a key. So Microsoft pretty much requires that to get into Outlook and things like that. And you can also use that so-called Microsoft Enter ID to log into other things securely, right? Which is a great idea. To the extent you can do that, that will be super helpful. The other things that are relatively easy, obviously, is your managed service provider can recommend different kinds of software to help detect and block different kinds of attacks. But look, lots of people are working from home right now, right? You can go out and buy a hardware firewall for a couple $100 and basically stick it in your garage and have your MSP configure it for you. Worth every penny, because think about it like there's a car thief. He's walking down a street. He's looking at all these cars, and all the alarms are turned on, and one is unlocked and doesn't have an alarm. Well, he's going to steal that car, right? It's just easier. So I'm not saying no one can break in if you have a hardware firewall and two-factor authentication, all this kind of stuff. You're just making it hard enough that the malicious actor is just going to go somewhere else and bother somebody else. That's what you're trying to do. Now, if you're a high value target, like a government agency or defense contractor or whatever, look, the sky's the limit in terms of what the bad guys are going to do to break in there. And then kind of all bets are off, and you need to do kind of everything you possibly can to secure yourself, secure your data. But if you're kind of an ordinary company, you just need to do a little bit more than the next guy, and that's going to help out a lot.
Yeah, I want to stick with the risk management aspect for a moment. Now, entrepreneurs often have to take risks in order to build their businesses. So what's your advice for identifying the kind of risks that actually grow their businesses or have the potential to grow their businesses versus those that might lead into, say, burnout or disaster?
Well, that's such a great question, Claudia. Thank you. So I think so I'm gonna recategorize that question a little bit by saying, every time you spend money on something and you're not sure what the return on investment is, which is pretty much all the time for an entrepreneur, try to do some A/B testing and some experimentation. So I'll give you an example there. Let's say you have a cold email program and you're trying to figure out, like, all right, well, I'm spending couple $100 a month on this. I'm not sure how good it is or how it's going to do. Well, try some A/B testing. Create one email, we'll call it A, and another email, we'll call it B, and send one email to half the list and the other email to the other half of the list, and see which one does better, right? So you can not only are you are spending money to send out the cold emails, but you're also getting some information in return, like, ooh, this email is actually better than the other one, right? And also keep those initial dollars low enough that if things don't work, it's not going to kill you, right? Like, don't go all in on, like, oh, I'm going to spend, I have 300 grand in the bank, I'm going to spend 200 grand on an advertising and marketing campaign. Bad idea, right? Because you have no idea if that's going to work or even get you one client, right? So I think it's so the basic advice is start small. If you're going to spend money, at the same time, try to get some information back in terms of A/B testing or whatever else you're trying to do. And also, like, ask your peers what's worked for them, right? I think it's so important to engage with other founders and entrepreneurs For example, I've got a small group of entrepreneurs and founders, mostly in the AI space, in the New York City area, and we'll do things like, hey, what? It could be something pretty prosaic, like, hey, what service provider are you using to do payroll, right?
Mhm.
Are you using Gusto or Deal, or what do you like about them or not like about them, right? Because unless you've started a company before, you just may not know, right? And then there are other, you know, more difficult questions like, should I outsource some of my sales to someone who says they can help me, right? Like, okay, you know, so, and I think the principle basically is don't let, one bad decision kill your company.
Yeah, and I think what you just mentioned about the peer feedback is so important. That's actually also something that I've been working on. I've created a small mastermind group. It's all health tech, so it's called the Health Tech Collective, because it's about exactly what you just mentioned. It's bringing people with different businesses, but maybe in the same industry together, so they can all evaluate each other's ideas or give feedback, and it's super, super helpful. Now, speaking of avoiding disaster in general, what are your personal high performance habits to help you stay happy, healthy, and productive?
Great question. Well, first of all, like, you have to have some things that are non-negotiable, and my non-negotiable item is I need to stay healthy. And for me, that means exercising, almost every day, right? And I know if I get to the point where my work is preventing me from doing that, then I'm working too hard, right?
Yeah.
And my other kind of cheat code on that is I wake up, make coffee, and go to the gym, right? So it's pretty hard for your day to get away from you if you
Yeah.
do your do your personal time kind of first, and get it out of the way, kind of thing. The other thing that's super important, is to continue to spend time with your friends and family. It's very easy to kind of, and to network, for that matter. It's very easy to isolate yourself, especially as a solopreneur. Like, oh, I've got to get this done, or I got to do this budget, or I got to send out this client newsletter or whatever. Yeah, those things are all important. But if you're doing that, and look, if it's a busy week, it's a busy week, right? But if you've gone for 2 months without calling your mom, like, you made a
Mhm.
mistake, like something bad is happening, right? And you need to fix that. So, the general advice is, personal time, prioritize it like early in the day before things can get away from you. Two is figure out what your non-negotiables are. For me, that's exercise. For someone else, it might be going out to a restaurant once a week or whatever, or spending time with their family. And three, remember to keep all these different social connections and build them into your calendar. Like, if you have something in your calendar that says, call someone in my network or call clients or whatever, and you don't allow that to get canceled, then it's likely going to happen. You just have to remember to have the discipline to do it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I think, look, going back to cybersecurity, I did want to mention, one more thing, which is that cybersecurity for Gen AI, is different from all other cybersecurity before it, right? Because there are new and different kinds of attacks there, right? So just because you have whatever Norton antivirus and all this other stuff, or even a hardware firewall, as I was talking about before, does not protect you from attacks on Gen AI. There are the number one risk for Gen AI, according to OWASP, which is basically a nonprofit cybersecurity institute in the US. It's like called prompt injections, right?
Mm.
And one of the things that my company AI Risk does is make software that detects and blocks prompt injections and other kinds of attacks before they get to Gen AI. So that's super important. And again, as I mentioned earlier, look, it's happening now, but we haven't seen anything in the headlines. We're going to see something in the headlines at some point.
Yeah.
Don't let that be your company that got hacked because
Ew.
of Gen AI and not having kind of guardrails and that last layer of defense and depth around it. And remember, Gen AI is not just internal. People are putting out chatbots and all kinds of things exposed to the internet. Like, you need to be super careful about that because the risks are giant, not just risk of loss or exfiltration of data, but just reputational risk. I mean, look what happened with Google, for example, when, its Google Images Generator was generating these crazy, images that were not appropriate, right? Their stock dropped, I believe it was $1 billion of market cap in one day when that happened, right? So these risks are real and very expensive. So you need to really pay attention to them.
So where can our listeners find you online or learn more about your work if they want to improve their cybersecurity?
Yeah, so the website is aicrisk.com, C for corporate. And then we're on LinkedIn as Artificial Intelligence Risk Inc. We've got thousands and thousands of followers on LinkedIn. You can find my podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's AI Risk Reward with your host, Alec Crawford. And then I'm also on Substack as well as Alec Crawford. So welcome you to follow me anywhere or connect on LinkedIn or whatever works for you.
Perfect. Alec, thank you so much for talking today and for sharing all your valuable insights. This is such an important topic, so thank you for doing what you do.
Thanks, Claudia. This has been great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Take care and talk to you soon. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please take a sec to rate and review my show or share it with a friend. That way you can support the show and help me reach and support other entrepreneurs like yourself as well. If you would like my help to figure out how you can go from overwhelmed and overworked hustler to empowered and confident leader, check out my website at www.wiredforsuccess.solutions and book a free 20-minute strategy session with me. Can't wait to help you get wired for success. Until next time, take care. Bye.